Welcome back to the second half of our program. We will now return to Dr. Denise Mari and Tom Lamar for remedies and tools to cope with a problem that has caused so much pain for so many people.
Dr. Mari, how can a person escape sexual slavery?
Well, actually, every addict comes to a point where he hits rock bottom. And you could say that it's a point that he reaches on the downward spiral of guilt and shame and broken relationships, suicidal behavior. And he comes to a point where he realizes he needs a power greater than himself to be freed from his addiction. And actually, he makes his first step towards recovery and God-given sanity.
What does conversion to the Lord mean on a practical level?
Well, conversion certainly refers to this change of heart, which is put into practice, and it's put into practice by the sexual addict making a decision, actually a commitment, to becoming more like Christ personally and to helping his family become more like the Holy Family.
Could a person getting faith-based psychological counseling be a way of putting the commitment to a new life into action?
Yes, absolutely. Because what happens with the faith-based counseling is that a thorough evaluation of the nature and severity of the sexual addiction occurs, and then an appropriate therapeutic counseling plan is made to address the sexual addiction problems, as well as any kind of other psychological or family problems that are going on. And also the counselor can really serve as someone to whom the sexual addict can be accountable, which is something very important to prevent relapse.
Mm-hmm. How about a Christ-centered 12-step recovery support group? That be helpful for a sexual addiction?
Yes, in fact, it is quite vital. The recovery group is a place where an addict can learn to bond appropriately with other men. He can learn to be encouraged, to be confronted, to make new friendships, to actually tell his story in front of a group of people who'll be affirming of his situation because they've been through it. And actually, he might even be lucky enough to find one person in the group who can act as an accountability guide for his spiritual growth, someone who can monitor that he is really putting his life on a new track which will lead him to the imitation of Christ.
What kind of strategies do counselors or recovery groups use to help struggling addict develop sexually sobriety?
Yes, actually, I think the protection plan is probably key, helping the addict to stay away from tempting situations and getting involved in relationships of acting out by protecting him really from himself.
What about encouraging personal spiritual disciplines?
Very important for the sexual addict to learn to be quiet, to be comfortable with meditation, contemplation, spiritual reading, and especially to listen to the voice of his own conscience so he'll know how to overcome his temptations, his weaknesses, and his faults, and also learn to become more comfortable with confessing what he's done to other people.
Speaking of faults, what about the role of forgiveness in healing?
Divine mercy, the assurance of forgiveness, is critical for the sexual addict to know that it is possible for him to be forgiven and also to become comfortable with forgiving himself and others.
What about finding a church?
Finding a church is also critical because in hooking up with a community of fellow believers, he can draw closer to Christ and his church.